Hey everybody, this is Mark Walker from Strongpoint, and thanks for making time for us with part of your day today. I'm going to be talking to you today about simplifying DevOps and compliance, and particularly I'm going to be showing some things in NetSuite. For those of you who are also interested in Salesforce, all the things I'm going to be talking about today are directly applicable to our Salesforce environments as well. And what we're going to be working our way through is just a quick overview of DevOps and compliance. What are you supposed to be doing? Why is there a conflict between these two things? And then talking about how we can use automation to eliminate dev bottlenecks. I think you're really going to find the third part, which is the main focus of my talk, really interesting, because I'm going to be talking to you not so much about what our software does, although we will be covering that. But if you haven't seen our software in full action, we won't be doing a full demo. So I encourage you to reach out to our sales team, and they'd be more than happy to arrange a detailed, deep dive demo into it. But really, I'm going to be talking about some ways in which customers are leveraging our software to do some fairly unconventional things that dramatically reduce the bottlenecks that normally occur in the dev process, or to flip it around the other way, allow them to be massively more responsive to their customers while also being compliant. Now, if you're not a public company, if you're not a regulated company, you can think of compliant as simply well managed. They're the same thing. The only difference between a compliance obligation and what you normally want to do to sleep at night is the ability to prove it. And our compliance tools do that in spades very, very efficiently. So this is still very applicable to everybody who's just trying to get things done super quickly. So what are you supposed to be doing, right? So in a perfect world, if you sat down with a theoretician who's talking about what exactly you're supposed to be doing every day, they would tell you some pretty basic things, right? And unfortunately, these things are speed-killing things. This is why DevOps, the whole DevOps conversation at the beginning. What you're supposed to be doing is documenting what you've done, right? And that means all the custom objects, all the fields, all the layouts, all the scripts, the workflows, the triggers, the processes, the settings, the preferences, the profiles, all the other customizable objects, also, obviously custom impacts on standard objects, and all the dependencies between all those things all the time. Now, the reason for needing to do this is if you don't do this, there's some huge development bottlenecks that come out the other side. But the problem that people have in doing this is itself a staggering job without automation. So we're going to be talking a bit about that, about how you can get around that bottleneck, of course. But once you've got that, what you're supposed to be doing is then using the documentation, not leaving it stagnant on the shelf, but using it to do risk analysis, to do impact analysis. So risk analysis is whether it's safe to change and what level of risk is it. Impact analysis is a much more detailed dive, conventionally done by dev, but it doesn't need to be done by dev, but we'll talk about that in a second, and basically saying what will be affected by a change. And what we need to do, and again, you can immediately think about this, risk analysis is a matter of judgment, and impact analysis is a matter of expertise. So immediately these things create huge bottlenecks as well, because in the NetSuite and Salesforce world, there isn't a big enough supply of people with expertise. And even if there was, those people are so crazy valuable in moving things forward. In fact, many of you are those people, that your time is better spent moving the company forward than checking to see if there's any downstream problems with something that's probably okay anyway. So we definitely want to get that out of the way. And we're supposed to be getting approval, routing, and tracking. Now, the interesting thing about this is not everything requires approval, but everything needs to be checked for approval, which goes back to your impact analysis and risk analysis, because if you didn't check it, how would you know if it needed approval, right? So it becomes a bit of it seems like you could, for example, if somebody wants to change their own save search, you don't need approval. But if they want to change a save search that's being used by a whole bunch of people, probably do, right? And if they want to change a report that's being used by the controller, you definitely do. So these sort of problems. And then finally, for the people who have compliance obligations, or for people who just want to basically make sure that they're running a tight ship, you need to make sure that only the approved changes, or the ones that didn't need approval, are being made, and that they only change the right things. And this is becoming incredibly important, not only for DevOps purposes and compliance purposes, but also for privacy and data security issues. When people get Easter eggs, somebody slips code in that does something that wasn't intended to be done, When that happens, it's because they weren't doing change reconciliation. It's a standard thing, but you can imagine it is mind-numbingly complicated to do. So without Strongpoint. So that all that work is a lot of work. And if you notice, none of those things are something that the company actually wants done. If you could possibly get away without doing it, you would, and that's what we're going to be talking about. To what extent can you get away without doing it, and how to pull that off safely? And the other problem for your companies is doing that work is not only time-consuming, it's incredibly stressful, because really the standard is perfection or very close to perfection, very, very, very high mitigation of risk. And when you ask somebody to do something with very, very big downside, with not enough tools and under time pressure, that's almost a definition of stress. And so we're trying to give people the right tools and the right information to make better decisions. In fact, if you're going to give the raison d'etre, why does Strongpoint exist? We exist to reduce that stress level. And by reducing the stress level, we deliver benefits to the entire company. But fundamentally, we're focused on the people who bear that burden. And the real big problem is that nobody in the world has ever had this conversation. You know, somebody coming up and going, hey, we missed our numbers because you never got the sales process fixed in the way we needed to, but way to go on that change control, right? That conversation outside of pharma, that has never happened, right? And so this is what causes the stress level, because the business is trying to drive forward, and the professionals who are administrative systems are trying to do their very best to be responsive, but doing it the right way tends to slow them down. So in our world, we're focused on doing things that automate all the heavy lifting. And in doing that, we actually do things that safer is not only not slower, it's actually faster than the risky way of doing it. So flying by the seat of your pants is actually slower than actually doing it the proper way. And that's true if you have automation. So when we explain Strongpoint, I'm going to be getting into a demo in a second, but when we explain Strongpoint, we think of it as 4 different interrelated tools. So the first thing you have is your automated documentation of all the things we were talking about. So that automated documentation bottleneck, we're going to kill that, right? Just get rid of it, because humans are terrible at doing documentation. Our software at least, is very, very good at it, and it able to build documentation that we can use for other purposes, not just documentation in Word docs, but documentation as data that we can then run automated best practices against. And we said that expertise needs to be used to judge risk and to judge and do impact analysis and do cleanup and do all sorts of other things. But we can put that expertise in a can in very, very smart software, because it's not unknowable how to do it. You just need to know how to do it, have enough time to do it, and be able to do it incredibly quickly and have all the information at your fingertips. Well, Strongpoint has all that. So we can automate those best practices. But also automating best practices allows you to democratize them. They don't just necessarily have to be done by the same people all the time. You know, my 15-year-old could do pretty good risk analysis against your systems if you had Strongpoint installed. She isn't trained to understand it. She may not understand it, but she would be able to put her hand up and go, yeah, that doesn't seem very safe. I don't think I'm going to go forward with that. That's what we want to do. Not because you have a bunch of 15-year-olds in your company, but you have changing people in your company all the time. And we want people who are not the people able to move the needle to be doing that work unless it's necessary. In order to protect ourselves, though, we want automated change monitoring. Dev, isn't going to get out of the process. There's many things that do require dev oversight. There's many things that people shouldn't be changing, and we want to know if they're doing that sort of stuff. So change monitoring all the time that actually looks at changes in bunches of different ways to figure out risk. And some of these changes are things for which there are system notes or audit trails in NetSuite or Salesforce, and some of them are things that there really aren't system notes or audit trails about. And some things are things that there couldn't be system notes or audit trails about, like somebody added code. By changing a piece of code, they actually changed the behavior of a field. Well, the field doesn't know that happened. The only thing that knows that is the code, but Strongpoint knows that that's really a change on the field. So you can then figure out, okay, who's using that field and that sort of thing. And then finally, continuous compliance auditing. If you're going to have automated change monitoring, you have to have a reconciliation process that says, wait a second, did everything get caught? What things appeared as being risky that didn't get approved? And surface those either to management, but eventually to the auditors, so the auditors can go through it really quickly. Now, this combination of things, for those of you who are public companies or regulated, produces massively shorter audits. In some cases, some of our customers literally go to the auditors and go, here's access to the Strongpoint auditor role. You know how to use it. Tell me if there are any problems. And the auditors know how to audit them right away. For other customers, it's a little bit short of that, but it's a continuous audit system. So they go into audit going, we know we're golden. We know we're going to be fine. So how can we make this even better? So what are the strategies our customers have come up with to make things even better? And the first one is kind of something that's kind of motherhood to Strongpoint, but it's the more you embrace it, the better the results. So the first thing is know everything. And that's the automated documentation part, right? So if you automatically know everything in your system, what was customized, who do I need to talk to, what depends on what's being used, what's not being used, then you can answer questions in seconds. I'll be showing you an example of that, but you really can answer questions in seconds where the real proper answer without Strongpoint would be, well, next time I have 5 days to myself, I'll give you a half-baked answer on that. And the hemming and hawing and the, frankly, the self-preservation activities that people get involved in and the procrastination that comes from not wanting to do very, very time-consuming things, that is a major drain on the business. And even though it seems like, well, how could knowing things make your DevOps process? Well, part of knowing things can actually eliminate the DevOps process, right? You can actually just skip dev completely and go, hey, that's just a bad idea, let's not do it. Or that's a really safe thing to do, let's just go ahead and do it. The advantage of this part is it's applicable to just about everybody, and it's minimal training required. So I'm going to show you the interfaces you would use, or some of them, and you'll more or less be qualified to use them. This is a training exercise, but very quickly. It also allows you to clean up and optimize things methodically. One of the big causes of inefficiency in a business, and definitely in the analysis of changes from DevOps perspective, is having too many objects in the system. But as we all know, trying to unpack what we can remove is tremendously difficult. So one of the key things to improve dev efficiency that a lot of our customers are doing is using the metadata to clean things up. And we actually have specialized tools and some new specialized tools coming out to even do that even better. So know everything is your first strategy, and use it to make your system as simple as possible is a big one. Strategy number 2, we expected strategy number 1. We designed for it. It was built right into the system. Strategy number 2 is really interesting. So automated self-help. So a number of our customers, including some of our very largest customers, I'll tell you more about them in a second, are using a record in Strongpoint called a process issue, which is really a smart ticket. And they're letting all sorts of people, either team leads inside operational departments or every single employee in their company, file process issues. And what these do is they combine automated documentation and automated best practices, but the person who's getting the result doesn't need to know about either of them. And I'll show you an example of this. And so they can file a ticket, and the ticket tells them right away whether they can just go ahead and do it themselves, or whether they need to go talk to dev about it, but it's not a big deal, or whether they need to, whether there's going to be a full software development lifecycle, a big problem. And what this does is it gives users answers incredibly quickly, like in seconds, and it doesn't involve dev at all, right? So often they can just go ahead and do things. Tremendous efficiency and tremendous reservation of that very precious dev NetSuite or Salesforce admin resource. Now, well, if we're going to have people doing that sort of thing, we probably don't want to give them access to everything in production. This is certainly this is about people changing maybe save searches and maybe some of the forms, some fairly light changes. But there may be power users who are allowed to change a bit more, but we're not giving them the ability to produce code or change things that are coded or anything like that. And in order to make sure they're not doing things that are dangerous or silly, automatic change monitoring sits on the outside and watches them and says, hey, was that safe? Was that safe? Was that safe? So we're sitting there watching the background to make sure. And so dev still knows what's going on. They know what changes are happening, and they know whether any of them were dangerous. And the backups could be used to restore things if they need to. So strategy number 3, citizen developers. So this is an idea that when Mark Benioff and Evan Goldberg founded Salesforce and NetSuite, the idea that people could run may change their own business processes was core. And you can see that throughout both products. There's a lot of things that in other products would be tremendously complicated to do, and they're quite easy to do in NetSuite and Salesforce. The problem is, and where that dream fell apart is, that the more stuff that's in the system, the more dangerous that becomes to do. Well, a bunch of our clients, very interestingly, have started to reinvigorate the citizen developer. And we saw this way back when we launched FlowDocs originally, which is now Strongpoint, but we saw this coming, and we were hoping to get there. And eventually, it's one of those things where you've got to lead by following. Let your customers teach them how to do things, and sooner or later they start to break through. So in this world, this deals with the what happens if there is something that is possibly a dangerous change, but may turn out in reality not to be a dangerous change. Well, some of these customers are starting to use sandbox accounts to basically run dev backwards. They're saying, you know what? Certain people in the company who work in different departments, if you want to improve your business process, you go into sandbox and you go ahead and do it. Because what's going to happen is Strongpoint's going to watch all the changes you actually make to those records, and it's going to keep a record of what those changes were, and it's going to analyze all of them for risk, and it's going to tell the dev team if you're touching anything that you shouldn't be touching. And what that means is they get dev not just out of the idea of checking whether something's safe, but they can get dev out of the entire process of reviewing whether something's safe until late in the process. Now, they do, of course, use our automated documentation, and the automated best practices may still be used as part of that process. So, go ahead and you teach them how to use, very light impact analysis tools or something, or just go ahead and make changes. I think in some of the customers' cases, and then automated change monitoring is vital. But what Dev is doing is it's watching those tools or watching those changes. And then, of course, when you're moving those changes into production, they're using all of our release management tools very carefully. They're doing a full dev rundown, but they're doing a dev rundown on a solution that the customer definitely wants. Where this gets complicated in the normal dev process is dev is being asked to perform a risk analysis on a solution that the customer doesn't even, or the end customer doesn't even fully understand yet, because they're exploring the idea, and it becomes a big, complicated mess. Now, this citizen develop activity is not appropriate to major system changes. If you are fully building out a new, fully automated, part of your business process with lots of scripting and lots of integrations and other things, that is the full province of dev, then you run it through dev, right? And we do DevOps activities, and you do get approvals the right way, and you do all that sort of stuff. But you do that when that's the right way to do it. You don't do it when it turns out that somebody wants to move a field on a form, right? Which could, in theory, cause a problem, but in practice probably won't. Right? So what I'm going to do now is go over and show you some of these tools in practice in one of our demo accounts. So the first example we were talking about, the first strategy we were talking about was know everything. And this is an automatically generated ERD diagram. It's one of the customer record. Those of you who are customers have probably seen this example before. I'm going to do the same example because it just drives home how know everything can save you a ton of time. And the example I always like to use is somebody who wants to change the company size list. Somebody comes along in a meeting and says, hey, can we change the company size list? Or another example that happened at our company today in a meeting I was in, where somebody comes along and says, hey, don't we already have a search that actually covers this, that's used to do this? And we were able to search through the documentation and quickly go, okay, what do you know about it? Oh, it's about this field. Okay, great, let's find all the searches that touch that field, right? But in this case, somebody comes along and say, I want to change the company size list. Now, for those of you who are admins or have ever worked close to the admin thing, in either, whether it's pick list in Salesforce or list in NetSuite, the proper answer is, yeah, well, look, all I have to do to tell you the answer to that question is I have to check every single thing almost every single thing in the entire system. I have to check every single field. I have to check every single search, at least all the ones that have SQL in it for sure, and any search on that record, where that might show up. I have to check all the code. I have to check workflows. I have to check all the filters on the workflows. I have to check almost everything. Right? And that information is so hard to compile without knowing everything that it's going to take me days and days. And even if I did it, I would never know unless I checked absolutely every single object, whether I've done it correctly, because there's no way of reconciling. Or in Strongpoint, you can simply go, okay, is the list used anywhere other than there? No. Okay. Do any other objects, any other objects touching the company size field? Yes, there's some forms, and there's the list, and then there's some searches. Okay, are the searches being used? No, the search hasn't been used since June of last year. Okay, well, I'm feeling pretty good. We're not worried about that one. And what about the other one? The other one has never been used, never ever been used. 12/31/1969 means we tried to find a date in which it had been used and it had never been used, right? So what else might I want to know? I might want to know whether there's a problem with this search, just in case they had a different date. I can open up the documentation really quickly and just go and go down and look at the search and go, okay, well, there's no SQL in here. Oh, but there is a filter on the value of that field. There's a filter on the company size field, which has the script ID, custom entity 7. Who's using this? Just Alex and Leo. Okay, here's your answer. Yes, we're going to make that change. I need to talk to Alex and Leo to see if we should change their filter to include or exclude the new value that you want to put in. But other than that, we're good to go. That's crazy faster than the normal way of doing things. And that's what we want to do, this interface, which you guys are now fully trained to use, more or less. You have to teach you how to get to it and things like that. But very, very easy. So the radical strategy customers are doing is they're thinking, well, why wouldn't we expose this to subject matter experts or leaders in all our departments? Because why do we have to make this only dev can look at this? Why can't we let people all across the company look at this? At least select people, because there may be private information in here, but at least select people. Why wouldn't we want to allow that to happen? And we're starting to see more and more where this is getting used by lots of different people to answer questions really quickly. And in our case, we were able to answer the question in the meeting and move on and make the decision. Now, we can all, if you notice, we have these date last used information. So that starts to, we can use that in cleanup processes. I'm not going to go through that right now. But remember, the other big problem with getting things done quickly, the more things that are in the system, the harder it is to get things done quickly. So cleanup is a vital efficiency activity, and all the cleanup tools are built right into Strongpoint as well. So we can tell you not just things that haven't been used for a while and things that depend upon things that haven't been used for a while, but things that have just been done badly or things that depart from best practices that are potentially slow. You can identify things that are running too often. You can identify errors that are occurring that you've seen before. All the tools you need to make your system as optimized as possible. And people don't necessarily think of optimization as a DevOps activity, but it is. You know, the Navy has a saying, a messy deck is a dangerous deck, because you're going to trip over something, fall overboard, and die, right? Well, the same thing about ERP systems and mission-critical CRM systems. The more junk you have lying around, the more likely people are to make mistakes. So we want to get rid of the junk. We want to do it safely. So let's move on to strategy number 2. So strategy number 2 is even simpler, but in a way more innovative, right? So in this case, this is a ticket. It's a record called a process issue. Now I'm showing you the process issue. And we got questions a lot about whether we can do similar things inside other ticketing systems, and we have an initiative to do that. We actually already have an integration with Jira, the famous Atlassian product, which is very commonly used for ticketing and dev work. We have an integration coming out with ServiceNow, which is also very commonly used for ticketing, and integrations with if you're using cases, we can help you with this too. And if you're in NetSuite or Salesforce. And actually, we're open. If you're using a different ticketing system, we're really interested because we want to do something really, really crazy efficient for your people. Now, in this case, somebody's come along and said, I would like to change this report, the California customers report for some reason. It's a saved search in NetSuite. And they said, I'm changing it. And at the same time, I'm changing something about this field. Now, these are just picked for demo purposes. And you notice it's telling you that if you're going to change these 2 objects, you need to go through a full software development lifecycle. But all they did was they just came in and they went, okay, I'd like to edit. I'm going to create myself a process issue, and I'm going to fill in, a description and fill something about what I want to do. And remember, they could have done this if they had expertise, they could have done it through the ERD view. They could have just gone to the records and taken a look at them. In this case, we're going to look at the California customer. We're doing it in an even simpler way. And they just said, what are you thinking about changing? And they can just select them. So I can just, it's just a normal pick list of all the objects in the account. And it's saying full software development lifecycle because it knows that there's scripting against this field. And our policies say, or your policy might be set up to say, hey, if you're doing that crazy dangerous, got to go do it in sandbox and get approval and formal testing, it goes back into production. You're very, very, very careful because you might fry code. If I was to go in though and take this out, and take it out and save this again, we get a completely different result. Right? Now, both of these are efficiency gains, right? So in this case, it says log changes only, which basically means that's our lightest level. I know one of our customers that's doing this has masked that to say, basically, go ahead and make the change. And the reason for this is Strongpoint has looked at this search and said, look, nothing depends on this search. It isn't a control. It's not a super important search. So go ahead and change it. We backed it up anyway. There's no risk. Knock yourself out. Well, the important thing about this is they got their answer in seconds by filling out the form, and they didn't have to talk to dev. And there's a thing called switching costs that's really important to DevOps efficiency. If you have somebody who's doing something really important, and you go, can I have 5 seconds of your time? Even if they answer the question in 5 seconds, which they sure as heck could do by using Strongpoint to do maybe 10 seconds, right? They end up, even if they go back to work right away, they probably don't return to their efficiency level for 15, 20 minutes or half an hour, right? So you really don't want them doing this. So now your help desk staff can do as good a job assessing the risk as your dev people can do. But more importantly, in this crazy seditious way that this company is doing it, somebody said don't use seditious, but I think it is. I think it's in changing the world. Let the user do it. Why the heck? Why did they have to go? Let's tell them right away. Go ahead. You're good to go. So and this is not a mom and pop software company that's doing this, but you can see that for small company, this could be incredibly vital because they probably only have one administrator, maybe a few hundred people or 100 people or so asking for details. But this is actually one of the largest security software companies in the world has now decided that they're going to let their own people, and they've been doing this for years now, about a year and a half. They let their own people use this and make their own decisions about what they're going to do. Now, those people don't have access to changing really critical things. They can't go change preferences or user roles and stuff, so they deal with that in a different way. But all common changes, they can make these decisions really quickly. So the reason this is able to make these decisions is we have these approval policies. So you can make different approval policies for different parts of the business. So obviously, if somebody was touching something that relates to finance, you would care. But in this case, for example, it could say, look, we really care about scripted object changes, and we really care about user role changes, and we maybe really care about web-related changes, things that touch externalities. We maybe don't care about searches and reports so much, and we may care only a little bit about control changes. We just need somebody from dev to look that over. You set up these different policies, but in the finance area, this may all be super sensitive. Right? And Strongpoint enables you to set up those differing rules really simply so that you have this really, really efficient thing. What we don't want is rules that people can't understand, right? So a really simple thing. So somebody said, we should be running our script changes through full software development lifecycle. And I think most people would go, well, duh, yeah, you should be very carefully changing scripting and testing it in the sandbox and very carefully bringing it in production. What Strongpoint understands, though, is that doesn't just mean scripts. It means scripts, workflows, other automation objects, and anything that touches them. And that's the hard part, anything that touches them. So if you remember in our example, there was a field, and that field said full software development lifecycle. Another field probably would have just said, you need to get some approval, or in some fields might say, yeah, we don't care, do whatever you want. It's only owned by your department. Here, then people can change it anyway, so knock yourself out. Now, our change requests do have really powerful tools for dev. So remember, some changes need to go all the way through change management. And so we have, again, tools that really simplify the flow of information between DevOps. And so one of the things we want to explain to people is what can be safely changed or modified. So here we have a change request with 2 objects on it. That sample search we're looking at, the one that Leo and Alex hadn't used for 7 months, or 7 months, 9 months, or 10 months. And that field that had all the scripting on it. Well, when we look at impact analysis, and somebody's asked for approval, it says, look, you can go ahead and change that, the sample search. That's no big deal. This thing, though, it's got lots of problems. It's been recently used, it has dependent scripts, it's not archived, it actually depends on a managed bundle. So if you were to change things about this, the bundle is going to come back and overwrite it anyway, right? So the reason why this is a DevOps activity is, hey, this lets the approver know the same thing as the dev team knows, which makes it much easier for the dev team to explain what the problem is. Right? And the approver is much more confident in their answer because their answer was just very easy to look at. Now, if you go back to this situation, I'll explain the third crazy and exciting innovation that people are doing. Remember before we had this answer. We had number of daily script executions was causing this to go to the full software development lifecycle, which means they have to go off. Now, the reason it's saying that is because they're scripting running against the field. So unless dev looks at it, we don't know whether or not that change is going to break the scripting. It might, or it might not, right? It depends what the change is, right? So if, for example, you're changing the text area size, probably not, right? If you're changing the field type, almost certainly. If you change the data type, almost certainly it's going to fry it. But there are some changes where that wouldn't happen. And if you're changing it by adding it to another form, or you're changing who can view it, like the permissions, probably not, right? Probably isn't going to affect the code unless the code is really badly designed. So not one of our customers, a bunch of our customers recently said, whoa, wait a second. Yeah, but the problem is once you get to this point, you now have to go through a full requirements process with dev. Because how's dev going to give you an answer unless it goes, okay, why are we changing it? What are we going to do? Oh my goodness. And for many changes, at least the changes that the power users can think through, they won't have fully thought through the problem yet anyway, because it's actually an idea about how we could make things better. It's not actually yet a decision that we're going to make things better. So what they did is they gave them access to their sandbox accounts. Now, so they said, hey, the sandbox account, power user 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you guys are citizen developers. You represent your departments. You want to change the way something works, and you feel like you have the technical skills to do that to a proof of concept level, you go do it. And don't come and bother us until your team, until either you have a problem, or we come and bother you because we can detect that you're stepping on the landmine, or you think you've got a solution. Any one of those three things, we'll take over and we'll make sure it's done properly. And so what these people are able to do is they go into the sandbox, and while they're in the sandbox, Strongpoint is watching all the changes that they're making, right? And it's saying, and it's alerting. So dev has a list of all the changes, who's making them, and which ones are risky. So if they're making changes that are risky, dev can look in and go, yeah, that's not that risky. That's not that big of a deal. I'm not going to bother them. As opposed to, whoa, what are you doing? Why are you writing code against the GL or doing something crazy? They go, yeah, we don't even like you doing that in Sandbox. So what they're doing is they're using the continuous change monitoring Strongpoint, but they're not using it in production only. They're using it in the sandbox as well to enable dev from a distance to watch what the citizen developers are doing. And sometimes they'll be able to go and say, hey, yeah, that looks crazy dangerous. Like you just added scripting to something that's already scripted, highly scripted. That's probably not going to work out. So we'd like to talk to you, and they intervene at that point. What they found, though, if you think about it, is most of the changes that people are making is about moving things around on forms, optimizing processes a little bit, adding a new field for this. It's not anything. It's things that in theory could cause risk, but in practice don't. And the result is being massive performance improvements and a massive increase in team satisfaction. Because now the whole company is able to move the company forward, not just dev. And so dev is exclusively focused on building really complicated things that add massive value to the company, and on vetting the things that the business has already validated and knows they want to deploy, and just engaging at the end of the process, making sure that was well designed, well built, and also supporting those people in the process. So that's our third strategy, our citizen developer strategy. So there's obviously tons of other tools in Strongpoint. There's segregation of duties tools. There's environment comparison tools, which are also used as part of this process. You're going to use serious release tools that allow you to do environment comparison and things like this. But the important takeaway I want to take for today is that none of these things that we just did in any way risk your compliance. These companies, all the examples I've given you are from public companies that are actually not just getting through audit, but getting through audit massively faster than they ever did before, because every single thing that changes in production gets checked by Strongpoint. And so whether or not you do the right things, Strongpoint will catch it, and the team will review it, and they will stay on top of it. So, and it's not, these plans are not intended to be a suggestion that you give anybody untrammeled access to production. It's just an example of how you can use it, particularly the sandbox accounts, and very, very light change rights in production to enable much, much faster development and much more value to your business while reducing the stress and the overstress on the dev team. So I think we have some questions came in. Why don't we open it up to questions? The first question is, do you have to roll out all of Strongpoint to get these benefits? Right? And the answer is no. Right? If you think about our different types of benefits, the first one, the know everything, that's actually, of course, built into our documentation product. It's also, if you have a very small team, you could even use our flashlight, product for very small teams, product to do this. So you don't need to do that. I think most of the benefits come from our intelligent change management product, so the middle tier product. And then obviously, if you're public, there's other reasons why you need our enterprise compliance product, principally SOD, master data controls, and other things. So really, you don't need to roll it all out. And in fact, even if you bought all of it, we very commonly see people move through stages, very much like this: know everything, monitor everything, and then eventually move out to more complex compliance change management processes. And second question, what if somebody breaks something, right? So what if this, we sort of said the happy path, right? So people go off and they get warned about risk and they go and they change it, and they did actually do things improperly, and they didn't break anything because they actually had the right answer. What if they did break something? And this sometimes happens either because somebody didn't follow the process, so they didn't check, or because they had an unintended consequence. So we sometimes see these unintended consequences when somebody, for example, changes a form, and it doesn't break the software, it breaks the people, right? So somebody's going, move my cheese, and they can't find where they're supposed to do something in the process. And so Strongpoint will attack that in two different ways. First of all, we know everything that changed. So you can say, well, this problem came up last Wednesday. What changed last Wednesday? Or you can say, no, the problem relates to this field or this form or whatever. Based on what you know, you can say, what's connected to that, and did any of those things change? And you do that either by a search or by simply navigate. Next question. So I see a module called Intelligent Change, and another called Enterprise Compliance. Do you need the Enterprise module to do this? So I kind of referred to that in this, the answer I gave. So the difference between those two modules is Intelligent Change Management is essentially everything you need to do DevOps. So it really, for the things we're talking about today, Intelligent Change Management is what you need. What the Enterprise Compliance adds is, first of all, the auditor interfaces for auditing. And secondly, it adds the segregation of duties analysis, so making sure that you can also very, very efficiently assign permissions to people or assign user roles. So for example, same thinking that we see in this product, in our segregation of duties module, you find out whether or not you can, or normal people find out whether or not they can assign a role to somebody by trying to do it. And if you can do it, you can do it. And if you can't do it, you can't do it without permission. You have to go back and get permission before you can do it. So for example, nobody can give away the admin role, but somebody can give somebody the sales role. And you don't need to go through a complex approval process to give somebody the sales role, because you just can, right? If they have access to the system, you can go ahead and do that. And then also the other benefits, of course, we have the other thing you need to pay attention to very carefully about to monitor and be careful about is your master data. This is becoming incredibly important for privacy purposes, GDPR, and in Europe, and or for European contacts everywhere, but also for just maintaining things like the account records, the item records, the other core records that if you change those things, it can cause significant problems in the system. Strongpoint has advanced tools for doing that. But the main thing you need for these DevOps benefits is the intelligent change management suite. Well, I hope you guys found this interesting and useful. As I said, I didn't try to do a full demo of all the functionality in the system. If you haven't seen Strongpoint before, there's a lot of other tools that have a lot of other functionality in it. Please reach out to our sales team or reach out to your customer success teams. And if you are customers already, it's a great idea. There's been a lot of changes lately. I know your account management teams will be reaching out to you. We're doing a big rundown with customers, taking them back through all the things they already have access to, particularly that cleanup and these sorts of strategies. We'd love to get you engaged with them and help you get the benefit of the capabilities you already have, but by leveraging the experience of other customers who've taken them to the next level. Thanks for your time, and look forward to talking to you all offline and answering any of your questions in the future. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.